Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of GCNC Worldview. I am Chris Day, your host, co-founder of the Global Cannabis Network Collective, and CEO of Gateway Proven Strategies. Really glad you're here and continuing to follow this discussion about the global cannabis industry and those things that are relevant to moving business forward around the world. We're nearing the end of the season. We have 2 episodes left. And over the next 2 episodes, we're really going to be talking about movement. And when I talk about that, I mean movement of finished products, about API ingredients, and even biomass. It's really complicated moving these types of things across countries and continents. Equally complicated is the money that follows those transactions. And so today we're going to be talking a bit about part of that in terms of how are payments transacted. What is it that is considered when a larger company is looking at getting into finance, payments, banking as it relates to the cannabis industry? And before I introduce our guest today, I also don't want to forget to thank the guys at Thermador in the UK who helped make this podcast possible. They help us with the editing and distribution of the show each time. I want to thank Ninth Block Marketing and Advertising in Denver, who've been a great ongoing sponsor in supporting us. And also our global sponsors like Bovida, who have been just immensely supportive in almost everything we do. So to introduce today, I've got Alexandra Maxwell. The Senior Strategy Manager of Worldpay. Alexandra, thanks so much for coming on to GCNC Worldview today. It's great having you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really pleased to be here.
Of course. We first met, I think, last year at MJ BizCon. Rather new addition to the GCNC. Really glad to have you guys on board, because certainly the discussion around money has always been a hot one for the cannabis industry, both way back in black market discussions, but even more challenging, I think, today in how do legal transactions transpire and operate in the cannabis industry. But tell me a little bit about your role, about Worldpay, and sort of how you've come to be part of that organization and what the objectives are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as you said, certainly a hot topic for the industry. So I lead our cannabis strategy globally. So Worldpay is the world's #1 global merchant acquirer. It is 300 different payment types, over 130 countries. We work with 20,000 clients, from high street coffee shops to large software providers, to governments, to airlines, to grocery stores, and now I'm very thankful to say, cannabis dispensaries as well. To put it really simply, our business is ultimately about taking payments, making payments, and managing payments. And we have a full suite of industry-leading tools and services to support exactly that for our merchants.
It sounds real simple. You get something that somebody wants, you give them a credit card, you do something, money's transacted, it shows up on the other side in a bank account. But nothing in cannabis is simple. So, and I know while Worldpay is operating in all of those countries, you've just really started to dig into cannabis. What are the challenges that you're seeing? How is that going? And where have you all chosen to start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So absolutely not. We are not working with cannabis businesses on the global scale just yet. So we built our cannabis program about 12 months ago now. Ultimately, we're committed to supporting cannabis merchants in legal markets with compliant, transparent payment solutions that the industry needs to continue growing and maturing. So as you mentioned, nothing in cannabis is quite that simple. So, the way that we have to build this program is a little different to some other industries. first of all, in every single market, we have such a variety in terminology and definitions and regulations and, product compliance requirements, which means that, although I would love to look at this business on a global scale, every single market requires its own very high touch, unique program. And that program, it's foundational with what the regulatory requirements are. We start there. So you could take Canada as an example. This is our first market that we launched in. We take the Cannabis Act and we build an entire program based on, say 4 types of business within the country. So that is medical businesses, recreational businesses, ancillary businesses. And then the 4th category is CBD, focused on the high street, which, although not available in Canada today, is certainly available elsewhere. And then from those 4 definitions, we need to build the exact requirements of every business that's compliantly working within the space, just as the foundational starting point to think about moving money.
Mm-hmm. As you're looking around moving that money through the banking system, I know, depending on which country you're in, some banks and both individually and the governments within, which they operate are better than others. So Canada makes sense to me, but as you then look at other countries in what is, defined, I guess, for you all as a high risk category, how are you looking to make those next sort of country selections on where you're going to expand into?
Mm-hmm. And again, I think we're going to spend half of this discussion talking about regulatory frameworks, because that is the foundational piece here. Is we always look to markets that have controls in place, so we know what compliance looks like. The more gray areas that exist, the more challenging it would be for us. And, we're seeing even globally the rise of synthetic cannabinoids. It's not a lot of, regulations associated with them right now. That means that we don't have a clear path on how we can do this successfully and correctly. So it adds additional layers of complexity to it. Then when you take that a step further, in any market where you have overlapping policy, so the US is a great example, whether you've got both federal policy and state policy, adds an entire other layer of complexity to us. But to go back to this idea of high risk, the definition of high risk, there's many different types of risk that could be associated with this industry. Ultimately, on my side, I guess we're gonna have to cut that bit. Sorry, we can't go down that high risk path. That's all right.
Okay, so no, it's fine. We so as we look, okay, guys, the Thermador break right here. So talk to me a little bit on sort of directionally with Worldpay, what you're looking for in terms of the types of structure. We know within Canada, you've got the dispensary model available. A lot of other countries are looking at using existing pharmaceutical locations, pharmacies and others as those distribution points through prescriptions. That's especially true in markets like, say European markets. How are you looking to explore or expand into these different structures? Will we see sort of ease of payment starting to come into, say, the European markets because they seem to be more pragmatic in setting up their infrastructure? Or do you see more growth opportunity in places like the US that may have overlapping regulatory frameworks, but pretty robust transaction volumes?
Oh, great question. I think there's opportunity in both of these areas. There's opportunity in this industry really across the board. For us, it's about finding the starting place. As a large business that works in so many different industries, we kind of need to pick and choose what the best approach is for us based on the capabilities that we have today, but also based on also based on what the learning and growth of our program will look like. So to give you an example with Canada, Canada was a wonderful starting place for us because we have 3 great industry segments that we can tackle. We know what the licensing looks like, both on, you know, the sort of federal level with businesses like the medical businesses or the sales license associated with that. We have provincial licenses, which is fantastic. We have oversight on products themselves so that we know that the products that our merchants are selling meet those regulations. Those 3 things are key for us. Obviously, within the recreational element of this industry is a significant opportunity. You know, that's where we're seeing a lot of growth. It seems to be the bulk right now of transactions, but it's also one of the most difficult to get right. And if you look at the payment challenges that the US is facing right now, associated with that, again, if we talk about this overlapping policy of do we follow federal or do we follow state guidelines, that's where that level of complexity, you know, in some areas is too difficult to overcome right now. That doesn't mean that we don't keep a very close eye on regulatory changes in the US. But that can be associated with safe banking, which, you know, continues to be on and off the table in the US, but also the Farm Bill is up for renewal this year. And the Farm Bill might add additional clarity to the CBD market in the US, which certainly has its own, you know, gray areas or challenges associated with it.
Yeah, certainly within the political set, it does. I think the rest of us who are mostly rational human beings understand sort of its role in the world, but you know, you could have picked a lot of different sectors and career paths, Alexandra, with the background and experience you've got. How is it that you chose this one? Like, what made you want to come into Worldpay to sort of head up this cannabis project? It seems like a lot of work to navigate, and there may have been other smarter career choices for you. You know, having spent a number of years in it myself, I both have a love and a hate relationship with the complexities we're talking about. But what brought you here?
Yeah, I'm very thankful. This is not my first rodeo in the cannabis industry. I was with a Canadian producer before this, and this was a LinkedIn opportunity that dropped into my lap, and I'm very thankful for it every day because it's such a wonderful, challenging, exciting space to be in. Whether that is the cannabis industry overall, I mean, I think anyone that works in this, I'm sure that anyone that's listening to this podcast right now, you know, we don't need to talk about the challenges, but the excitement associated with working in new industry development. But even on the payment side of the house, it's been such an interesting opportunity to be on the other side of the wall, I'd say, you know, in a business that is not cannabis focused, and to grow the understanding of this industry in these new ways that could have such significant impact long term to, you know, the maturity and the growth, the health of this industry. So I'm very lucky. I was very lucky to have this drop into my lap, but very thankful for it every day for, you know, the opportunity to really continue to build this industry, you know, with people like yourselves, with the GCNC, you know, with the many partners on board. It's really a wild adventure.
Yeah, it is. You know, when I shifted out of sort of mainstream marketing and advertising years ago now, and into this space, it really was because I saw it as a complex challenge, and it is certainly that, but it also becomes a passion point, I think, for most of us to you know, challenge what has been a detrimental setup for a long time and hurt a lot of people, and whether it's helping to change the way in which monetary transactions happen for legally operating companies, or it's changing the mindset of misguided politicians about sort of righting the ship in directions that are for the betterment of humanity. I think we all get to play our role. And I really like talking to folks who have these diversified skill sets that have come from all these different backgrounds, and now helping to drive the industry forward and help everybody be successful. It's something that I love seeing out of companies like WorldPay, because it doesn't have to pick cannabis to participate in, right? You don't have to do the company's going to be fine without going into cannabis. And certainly I would guess there is a healthy respect for the monetary upside over the long haul. But it's also neat to see trend-setting people and companies come into the space. So as you're sort of leading strategy development, and you're talking about where WorldPay wants to be over the next couple of years, and then into the future, where do you see sort of the leading opportunities, and what are you hoping to help guide at WorldPay as sort of the next couple of steps?
There's two considerations here. The first is where is the market going to go in these, potential new spots that we're all watching? So, we have a great program in Canada right now. We have just launched in the US with ancillary and CBD only for now, though we obviously keep a very close eye on regulations there to see how that will expand. I think everybody is watching Germany at the moment. I cannot say what that's going to look like, if that framework is going to, be the right next step for us, but we're certainly keeping a close eye on it because
it's a podcast. We can speculate all we want.
Yeah. Well, Germany, the green wave, I know I keep hearing that. Will there be a green wave? Won't there be a green wave? Who else is going to jump on board in the European market? I don't think anyone has those answers yet, but I think we're all keeping a close eye on it. And then, for us, high street CBD, I don't know, from being in the industry on the producer side, and maybe this is just a Canadian lens that I've had in the past, but I feel like it's been sort of a sleeper industry in a lot of ways. Like the way that we've gone from, CBD products in some of these markets being, unheard of or underground to, being so readily available on, pharmacies or local, big grocery stores. That's really been an incredible journey. And if you look at markets like the UK, you have a lot of pubs and bars and restaurants that are now offering CBD beverages as a normal non-alcoholic version. That's such an incredible opportunity at the moment. It's the stigma associated with CBD has changed radically in the last 10 years, and I'm really excited to keep seeing how that goes. So that's another area of focus. So when it comes back to what's the future hold for us, the first is, where is that framework robust enough that we can build a program that's compliant, that makes sense, that has the people that we want to work with in it. And the second piece is that payments is such an ecosystem. It would be great, if I had the ability to say, yes, we're going to launch in this great market that has a wonderful financial opportunity for us, that has great regulatory framework that we can build a program from. It also takes quite a network of people behind the scenes, other businesses aside from us, to buy into that. So, our own program is approved by partners, by, sponsoring banks in some areas. It's approved by card networks. So, a lot of what we're looking at is, where are those opportunities for us and our network, and how that network is also going to jump in and, see the opportunity, build the same programs internally themselves to allow this to happen. So it is a marathon, not a sprint, and never dull, but we will see. What I write down today of what our markets will be in a year's time and what our markets will be in a year's time, like, I don't know how close that's going to be. And I guess that's part of the excitement of this job, really, is you're kind of rolling with the punches all the time.
Yeah, it is. You mentioned some of the partners that have to buy into establishing a system and that flows and works. And you mentioned card networks. So we didn't talk about this in the pre-show prep, so I'm sorry, but it's there's so much rhetoric all the time, right? And in the United States, you have the large card networks sort of doing some saber rattling. around around shutting down their services, especially with dispensaries that are using, we'll just call them virtual ATMs. But yet, if you look at, operations in Canada, they're of course benefiting tremendously. And frankly, they're benefiting tremendously also from the US, but they gotta talk smack in order to cover their butts with politicians. So this is more of a, how are they operating outside of the United States? Are you finding these networks to be fairly easy to work with, open to the industry, or not? I will speculate personally, so you don't have to, on their attitudes inside the United States. But how are those partners sort of interacting in markets that aren't driven by US politics?
Let's talk about the US. The elephant in the room is that cannabis remains federally illegal as, Schedule 1, and that is ultimately the challenge. And unfortunately, while that remains the case, or until there are protections in place to I guess, prevent any enforcement on that, I don't imagine there'll be any movement from many companies that may want to work in this space. I think, associated with the networks themselves, in Canada, those rules were written for day one. I think the consumer experience in Canada, and I know we're talking a lot about recreational cannabis here, or medical cannabis, but those rules were written and transactions are flowing. And from a consumer perspective, I can walk into a dispensary or access my medical products very simply, pay however I'd like. And that's all been established and is set up fantastically. I think the CBD industry is also thriving. And again, we have the right controls in place to do so. We obviously have partners around the world for a lot of industries and a lot of things. I would say associated with cannabis, these conversations remain ongoing. As a partnership, as a network of businesses that must work together to get things right, that will always be the case. But until, every time we have a situation of challenging policy, there will always be further conversations to have. It will always take more time. There will always, be risks and challenges.
Yeah, I think one comment I have to make for our audience, because this discussion has rightfully been anchored a lot in US and Canadian policy and how those are flowing, especially since Worldpay sort of launched with the Canadian market. But for the audience, I can say, as I've traveled to all of these different countries around the world that I've been blessed to talk to professionals in and sort of done homework on how things are happening, it's important to note that while the US policy does create large global scale challenges, the world is moving. Transactions are happening, industries are being created, commerce across countries and continents is occurring. The US is being left behind, and it's by their own choice. At the federal political level, it's out of willful ignorance. And it's important to note that while some may think that the US serves as sort of this global hub of commerce, people are figuring out ways to work around it. I find that that's an important thing to point out, especially since a large chunk of the audience is from the United States, but a large chunk is also from Europe and South America and Australia and a lot of different places around the world where this industry continues to grow, money continues to flow, as do products. And so we can't be, if we're in the US domestic market, we're really heads down on, oh, look, New York has just legalized. That's big news for sure, but it's not global news. And at the Worldview, we talk about global movements and how things are transacting. And it's really been interesting to me to see how the US is going to continue to get left behind and isn't really going to be part of the future international discussion if they don't get their act together. which is a position that the US isn't used to being in for the last couple hundred years. So, you know, Fisher Cup bait, y'all. It's time to move. So anyway, I had to give my little side lecture, Alexander, there. I'm sorry. It just drives me crazy that this is still an ongoing problem. So
taking the optimistic approach, I'm sure there's many people, both of us included, that look forward to seeing, you know, policy change in the US.
Yeah, sure. But you know what? I'm going to spend 4 months this year in the European markets, talking to members there and talking to businesses there. And for those of us who understand how industries grow and move, if one door closes, you go to where there's open doors. And I think that's been the general philosophy of the industry overall. And it's good to see companies like Worldpay taking a similar approach in how they evaluate the future as well. So this is the big sort of crystal ball moment where we get to set aside a little bit all the spreadsheets and everything else and just, you know, speculate with me for a minute on where you think it is likely. All the caveats necessary, I think, have already been stated, but where it is likely that you will see, you know, Worldpay expanding into outside of the North American continent in cannabis over the next 18 to 24 months, let's say.
I mean, it depends who's listening to this that wants to knock on my door and give me a phenomenal opportunity. No, I think an area I'm really excited about is the UK CBD market. We're obviously a company with a very big footprint in the UK. We have a lot of phenomenal merchants there that are interested in these kind of products. So we're certainly looking at how we can support that correctly. Yeah, North America has been a big focus as, you know, for now, the biggest percentage of cannabis sales globally. But, you know, there are some interesting opportunities in APAC that we are keeping a close eye on. You know, certainly keeping a close eye on Australia and New Zealand as well. Lots happening as well down there. It is a crystal ball. Who knows? There's so much opportunity out there.
It's very fuzzy in that crystal ball right now.
It's so fuzzy. And I think that's what's so exciting is, you know, we could have this conversation next week and have a slightly different twist to it based on, you know, something that's come out in the news. And what an exciting industry to be a part of. Ultimately, like as Worldpay, what we're about right now is building a program that will last. You know, we could monkey with a machine gun, is that the expression, and go out and be like, we're going to do 50 markets by next year, but I'd rather do them slowly, do them right, and make sure that we're working with compliant merchants so that we have a program that's built to last. You know, even if it takes us a little bit more time to get to some of these other markets, even within Europe, when we go there, we want to know that we've built the very best program that, you know, is going to be scalable, that's going to evolve as the industry evolves, that's going to ultimately support our merchants, support our partners, because they are partners to us as we grow in this together. And I think, you know, regardless of what happens, even from a regulatory perspective, as long as we keep that as our main aim, in this industry, in any high-risk industry, that's how we're going to succeed as Worldpay, and how our merchants are going to succeed to take it from, you know, where they are today into being these global businesses, these Goliaths in the industry that they deserve to be, with the maturity, with the sophistication, without the, you know, how many times have we talked about it today? The crystal ball is fuzzy because there's so many changes. Without that uncertainty, that's my crystal ball optimist. That's what I want to see. That's the dream.
Oh, that's great. And I'm glad you mentioned the UK CBD market. It was in the first season of the podcast, back when it was called the International Cannabis Conversation. We touched on a couple of episodes where we were looking at the UK. It's been fun to watch that evolve. And certainly the Asia Pacific markets are also just intriguing. I need to circle back at the beginning of next season on some of those markets and catch people up on what's been moving, because I too have been watching a lot going on in Australia and New Zealand. We have a number of GCNC members there that have done phenomenally well, not only in Australia, but also expanding because of the trade agreements that exist into Europe. So yeah, we should definitely do this again. We'll, give it a little bit to see what happens with this next cycle in all these markets and see where we land with Germany, and then touch base again and see what happens next. But thanks so much, Alexandra, for coming on today. It's been great having you. And thank you to everybody out there in podcast land who has been listening. It's the obligatory beg to subscribe. You should do that because it just helps us get into your email boxes and reminders faster with all of these great discussions on what's driving the global cannabis industry forward. So thanks, everybody, and we'll catch you next time on GCNC Worldview. And thanks, Alexandra, for coming on.
Thank you.